Yes, hello and welcome to another Confessions podcast from your friends at Radio 2, specifically your particular friends at Drive Time. It's another collection of the trials and tribulations of the discerning Radio 2 listener. This week we have in our concise collection some troublesome turkeys, a dental disaster, a mouse misunderstanding, and a blazer bungle. Yes, it's all coming up. The main question is, who will you forgive? Speak now or forever hold your peace. Here it all is. Time for Drive Time Confession. You can send yours, by the way, at any time. confessions@bbc.co.uk, so it's just stapled together.
Well done.
2 pages, courtesy of Jeff, who sends in tonight's tale to our collective, Father Simon and the Eclectic Collective. Here we go. My confession goes back to 1981, when I was still at school. The next couple of sentences are going to give you a kind of a good sense as to where we're going to go with this story. As a keen 14-year-old, I got an evening and weekend job in the local butcher's. This was great for biology lessons, as I could bring in free eyeballs, brains and so on for dissection.
Oh, here we go.
So that's
brilliant.
So we could finish it there, actually. You could say, so what do you think, forgive it or not? Well, Christmas came and we were really busy plucking and preparing turkeys. One part of the preparation was to cut off the feet, as no one wants a turkey with claws, let's be honest. My biology teacher had asked me to bring in some feet so that we could... You don't often hear that phrase, do you?
You don't.
No. So we could learn about tendons and how they work. So I collected quite a few for class and took them in on the last day of term, just checking with our vegetarian producer, who is now passed out on the carpet. After a thoroughly entertaining and informal biology lesson, there were some feet left over. Again, a phrase you don't often hear. So I put them in my bag for disposal later, after scaring a few pupils at break, obviously. Our last afternoon lesson was the really exciting history. Collective groans. I sat down at my desk. I unpacked my bag for the joys to come. Now, not wanting to have to put up with the smell from my turkey feet, I put the bag on the windowsill and got on with the lesson. There were collective cries of joy as the end-of-term bell rang out, and much jubilation followed as we rushed to pack our bags and get home for the holidays. In the rush of all this, the bag of turkey feet got knocked off the windowsill and behind the radiator. Now, I have to tell you, I was totally unaware that I had lost it until we returned from after the Christmas break. I had completely forgotten them, and I went to history as usual. There was a funny odour in the room, and no one could quite place it. Well, when the headmaster appeared, instead of our usual history teacher, we were all rather surprised. He began to lecture us on our behaviour and how some selfish pupil had taken it upon themselves to sabotage the classroom on the last day of term. As we were the last class in the room, he knew the culprit was amongst us. Apparently my turkey feet had decomposed over the Christmas break, attracting a family of mice and a swarm of bluebottles, which had greeted the caretaker when he did his New Year rounds. It had taken several days to clear up the mess, and almost 2 weeks to get rid of the stench, which was still lingering despite massive amounts of disinfectant and carpet cleaner. Fortunately for me, there was no evidence to incriminate me, as what was left was just a squidgy mess. The headmaster was furious and demanded that the person responsible own up, but no one said anything. I sank lower and lower in my chair, feeling very guilty but also scared at my headmaster's red face and loud voice. After a minute of silence, the headmaster stood up and shouted, "Fine! If no one is going to own up, then everyone will have to..." Because all head teachers talk like this. "Everyone will have to suffer. The entire class will be kept in detention every day for 2 weeks."
Wow.
That's a big punishment.
It's pretty severe.
Well, with this, he stormed out of the room, leaving the class in a state of shock. Whispers started flying around from all of my classmates. Who did it? Why do we all have to suffer? That kind of thing. Many looked at me accusingly, but I denied it all. I felt terrible, because I knew if I went to my headmaster and explained myself, he might understand and the whole thing would be forgotten. But I was too scared and worried that my classmates would find out and judge me for not owning up there and then. I think you're probably right. So I kept quiet and I sat out all the detentions with the rest of my class. No one ever did find out where the awful smell and the chopped feet had come from, although by this time it was just unidentifiable gross matter, which is the phrase that was used. You're right, I was chicken, which is ironic. So I seek forgiveness from all of the history class for making them sit through 10 detentions that they didn't deserve, for missing valuable lunch times, and for not being man enough to own up to my mistake, and for the previous crime of taking a cow's tongue to show Jenny Jones, who I secretly fancied. It didn't impress her. I hope the collective will find it in their hearts to forgive a young, forgetful boy. You can imagine, going to school with Jeff would have been a real hoot. Jeff, what have you got in your bag this time?
Not as bad as getting propositioned by Jeff, clearly.
Oh, I see.
With his cow's tongue.
Can you imagine? You think, well, you've got to try and impress the girls somehow. You're thinking,
yes,
hey, Jenny,
I know what I'll do.
Hey, Jenny, I know that, him over there, he's captain of football, and...
But look what I've got.
Look what I've got. I've got a cow's tongue.
It's quite sweet, really, isn't it, in a way?
Well, I think. Would that have impressed you at school?
No, but you'd certainly remember him, wouldn't you?
You would.
You'd remember the
say,
boy with the cow's tongue.
Everyone run away. That's the boy with the cow's tongue.
Do you know, this story reminds me of something that actually happened at my school.
Aye.
Somebody on purpose put some calamari down the back of the radiator.
That's a high-class school. As we've already established.
Clearly, yeah.
Yeah, in history class, and it really did stink the whole classroom out, obviously, and they had to remove the radiator to get it off. I can't actually believe...
Just with calamari just knocking around.
No, I suppose, yeah, I don't know where they got it from. I think it's a bit extreme for the head teacher to impose, what was it, 2 weeks of detention for a bad smell in the class.
But the smell had been there, and there's a lot of work, and the caretaker, and rats, and blue bottles.
I mean, number one, I don't think it was Jeff's fault that someone knocked the turkey feet behind the radiator and he forgot about it. But I think it would have been better for him to own up, because he had to do the detention anyway. So I think if he'd owned up, he probably would have done detention, but he also would have been seen as a bit of a hero by his classmates, I think, for being brave enough to own up. So I think, Jeff, you're not forgiven.
I'm wondering if we dare have... asked for sort of butcher's confessions, really, because I'm not sure.
I think you should.
Well, there's going to be a lot of this. I took a cow's tongue to school to impress
the
like
ladies.
That. So I thought I'd take its stomach. Anyway, Brother Matt.
Well, yes, clearly this head teacher is pretty strict, but I would argue that having these 10 sessions of detention is very much an I Spartacus moment of no one will admit we are going to be all punished together rather than just one of us being sick. They grew as human beings, I would say.
No, they didn't.
In those 10. Yes, they did. And also, to be honest, if the entire class is staying behind, it's a class. It's not detention. It's a class. They're all there.
Yeah, but school's finished.
No one's being punished. You're all being put there together. I Spartacus, solidarity with the workers. Well done, Jeff, I say.
Spartacus.
Absolutely, yes, absolutely works, definitely.
So it's part of the extension
definitely
of the class
forgiven.
war.
Well done.
Here's another confession. A dear shouty Simon and the esteemed collective. Am I shouty?
No.
Apparently.
I don't think so. Not forgiven. Having listened to other listeners' confessions over the years, I really feel it's time that I too begged forgiveness for my actions that happened in a dental surgery over 30 years ago. I always quite like a dental confession. By the way, you should see the dental confessions that we don't accept.
Oh, really?
Really? And it would be nice to put them in a book.
Are they violent?
No, they're not violent. They
Disgusting.
They just involve too much...
Gore.
Yes, gore.
Wow.
Yeah, essentially that. I'm confident that the dentist involved is no longer in practice, but I'm not sure of the whereabouts of the patient. But it is not from either of them that I seek forgiveness. If I may set the scene, I was a directionless 18-year-old, and my own dentist, let's call him Mr. D, saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. He thought I would make a good dental nurse. You know, the smiley girl in white who hoovers out the debris while the dentist does their bit, while talking to you probably about your holiday plans and something like that. Anyway, of course you can't reply, so it's utterly pointless. Anyway, knowing that I was between jobs, Mr. D phoned my dad and asked him if I'd like to work for him. He would train me up, and if I liked the work, I could go to college and study for my dental surgery assistant examinations. Well, it all sounded great, and I quite fancied myself in a nurse's uniform, so I duly turned up and learned on the job, so to speak. I took to the work with enthusiasm and was soon mixing up fillings and holding patients' hands, vacuuming up bits of this and that, and we changed that bit, I think. And Mr. D seemed very pleased with my work. I also had to learn how to write up dental records, and this is where my problem started. What I didn't know then but do now is that I sometimes get my left and my right a little mixed up. If you don't know how to write dental records, I shall try to explain. The chart is written in 4 quadrants with 8 teeth in each quadrant. So the dentist would say something like upper left 6 occlusal, lower left 7 mod. I think that's right. Anyway, it says MOD, so I'm imagining it's...
Sounds like the shipping forecast.
That's great, yeah.
And a mod is a big filling from front to back. And you had to chart the work. I really have trouble with directions to this day. If someone asks me which way to go, I will often hold out my right hand and tell them to go left. People get confused. The friends and family are now used to me, and always ask for clarification. But on this fateful day that I beg forgiveness for, neither I nor Mr. D had worked out that I had this problem. Our patient that day was a local councillor. He was typical of his type, all plumped up and full of his own self-importance. We were running slightly late with our list, which dentist doesn't, and when I called him in to come to the surgery, he was very agitated and barked at me that he had a very important meeting to attend at the town hall, and we'd better get on with it. I have to be honest, he put me in a bit of a flap, because he was so rude and so abrupt. He jumped in the chair, opened his mouth, indicating he wanted no small talk and no pleasantries. So Mr. D asked me, he's going to, you know what's
This is going to go well for him. Yes.
So Mr. D asked me what we were doing today, and with a quick glance at the notes, I said, lower left 6 lower left 6 mod, and he promptly injected Mr. Important with a mega dental block dose to numb his lower left jaw completely.
No.
It was only then that I realised that actually it was his lower right 6 that needed the filling. I looked at Mr. D and mimed, sorry. It was the other side. It's the right, not the left, or something like that anyway. Mr. Self-Important was in his own world behind his safety glasses, his mouth open, waiting for his jaw to go numb so that he could get out of the surgery and off to his very important meeting and make his important speech to his very, very important friends. Mr. D was unaware of this patient being so rude and had no idea that he was off to a town hall meeting and promptly injected his right jaw with another dental block, and we carried on with the treatment. When it was all over, I asked Mr. Important to rinse and spit, and it was at that point, when he covered me with mouthwash, that I realised how difficult it was going to be for him to get through the next couple of hours without the full use of his jaw. As he handed me his bib and said his thanks to Mr. D, he realised that his speech was somewhat affected by the double block. Mr. Important started ranting and raving about his important meeting at the town hall, but to our shame, neither of us could resist a little chuckle. This is because, as he was blasting us, he was basically saying, I suppose you think this is funny. Which, of course, it actually was, and he stormed out of the meeting. I beg forgiveness, obviously, from the collective, but not from Mr. D. He accepted my apology that day, and it never happened again. Not from Mr. Important, as I did apologise to him several times, but I also seek forgiveness from the other members of the very important town hall committee who had to endure him chairing the meeting while spraying them all with his spit, and the fact that they couldn't understand a single word that he said. I hope they got through it all without getting too wet. Well, I always like a good dental nurse story, and this was a good one. Thank you very much indeed, from the anonymous sender-inner. For tonight's confession, who would fall at the feet of the collective here? What do you say, Sister Rebecca?
I can really identify with this confessor, or confessee. Which one is it? Anyway, I can identify...
I think we're the confessees, aren't we?
This confessor, I can identify with. I've got no sense of direction. I've got no sense of direction whatsoever, and I can imagine myself getting the left and the right in the mouth completely wrong. I think the dentist should have noticed as well which side required the filling. Surely, I mean, surely there would have been a bit of a hole there for the dentist to see, rather than just listening to the dental nurse. And I think it's also incredibly lucky that she confessed. I'm assuming it's a she. Maybe it's not.
Yes, no, it is.
Okay, that she confessed because she could. I thought what was going to happen is that they were going to put the filling in the wrong side because they didn't want to admit that they'd put the injection in the wrong side. So I think for all those reasons, I'm going to forgive.
It's the bit where she says... the smiley girl in white who hoovers out the debris, and I quite fancy myself in a nurse's uniform.
Well, you can't assume.
No.
No, I say.
So what do you think, Brother Matthew?
Well, I've always loved that little patter they do with the lower left occlusion mods. Because it's great because...
It's an occlusal, not an occlusion.
Occlusion, yeah. I love it because I've never understood what it meant.
I think that's the whole point.
Yeah, it isn't. It's like being at an auction where they're just shouting things out and you've no idea what's going on.
What it means is he's got a gammy tooth.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it would be great if they said he's got a gammy tooth lower left. But the fact was, he's going for this meeting and he knows he's going to be having a filling anyway. It doesn't really matter whether both sides of your mouth are going to be numb. If one side's going to be numb, you're not going to make any sense anyway. So it's his fault. It's his own fault for going to the dentist and having a filling when he's supposed to be having an important meeting. So nothing to forgive in your
important fault.
Nurse's uniform. Well done.
I think you need to just control that urge.
Steady, Tiger.
Rein it back in just a little bit. This is Radio 2. It's another drive time confession for you. You can confess online. You can send us an email, confessions@bbc.co.uk, or go to the drive time pages on the Radio 2 website. This one comes from Robert, who sends this in, Dear Father Simon and the Forgiving Collective. After many years of angst and introspection, it is time for me to confess, and I wish to confess the sin of lying and deceitfulness. I was a very hard-working teacher the second year of my chosen career. I was teaching at an inner-city school at the time, where there was no grass, let alone a nature area or a vegetable plot. The children received a wide and varied education, not just from me, and were lucky to attend this school. However, some were not very wise in the ways of the countryside or nature. I was born and brought up in a small village, and have very fond memories of a quite idyllic childhood, playing in cornfields and picnics by the river, that kind of thing. In the fullness of time, I found weekend employment in some of the local farms, and spent many a long, wet summer check-weighing punnets of strawberries before they were all sent off to supermarkets, or picking potatoes. When I was a student, I still worked on one particular farm, and during the Christmas break, worked sorting potatoes before they were sent to be made into chips. Now, I shall explain just a little more, just to clarify my later crime. Potatoes are not just dug out of the ground and sent to the crisp factory. Oh no, they need to be stored until the correct amount of starch has turned to sugar or something, so the crisps have a lighter colour. The potatoes in particular had been harvested in September and stored loose in large barns with a straw covering to keep them well insulated from the frost. As winter had moved in, so had the mice. It was my job to stand at a conveyor belt and pick out the stones, the mud, and the rotten potatoes as the spuds rushed by on their way into a large articulated lorry. Sometimes I would pick up what seemed like a lump of mud, and it would then grow legs and a tail as the stunned mouse quickly revived itself and tried to run off. You can imagine my shock the first few times this happened. The mesmerising drone from the conveyor belt, the repetition and monotony of the job lulling me into semi-consciousness, and then a lump of mud runs off. Well, most of the time I could just drop the mouse on the ground, but occasionally one would seek refuge by running up the conveyor belt and into the huge lorry trailer. Well, now fast forward to my second year of teaching in Birmingham. The topic was healthy living. Foods were cut up, discussed, and their nutritional values explored. I'm not sure how this came about, but I started telling the class some of the jobs I'd done on farms. I then started on how crisps were made. So the potatoes were dug up, stored, and then taken to the factory, and I mentioned how the mice liked the warmth provided by the fermenting potatoes and the large source of carbohydrates. I also said how I occasionally picked up a stunned mouse and dropped it to the floor. It was when a child asked what happened to the mice that I missed that it all started to go wrong. Like someone else had taken control of me, I explained that the potatoes aren't touched again by human hands. The potatoes reach the factory, are automatically washed, peeled and fried. You know the little black bits you occasionally get in the bottom of a packet of crisps, I said. They all nodded. Well, they are mouse crisps.
Oh, well.
And that's what happens to the mice.
Oh dear.
The rogue mice that get through are turned into crisps. And to illustrate my point, I drew a crisp shape with a tail and two ears.
Oh, right. Okay.
My class, who had no reason to doubt anything that came out of my mouth, sat agog staring at me, and they all said they would never, ever eat crisps again. Now, for a reason I'm still not sure of today, I didn't finish it off with "I'm joking, guys," or anything else to let them know that it was mostly untrue. I'm sure there is a special humane mouse-removing device at the crisp factory, but I can't vouch for that. So far this time in the collective, I ask forgiveness for my little joke. Probably my old class have started eating crisps again, although hopefully not too many. I wonder if we added that line. I don't know. They were a lovely class, although maybe a bit gullible, and I didn't mean to mislead them in any way at all. Although I did.
Yeah.
Yes, well, it's a fantastic bit of creativity, you know, because you always get to the bottom of a packet of crisps and those little kind of bits that fall to the bottom. It's incinerated mouse, and I'd never known until I read that email. You can imagine that a bunch of towny kids would go, "Oh, my goodness me, if I'm going to have a crisp, I better look out for the chopped up mice." What do you think, Sister Rebecca?
Well, that's one way of getting them to give up crisps, isn't it, and become a bit more healthy.
Well, they've got
without
dead
eating.
mice in there.
Yeah, but I think, he's a teacher. He was in a position of responsibility, and he would have known that they would believe what a teacher told them. So it was a bit naughty. On the other hand, they could have just left the black bits behind and eaten the rest of the crisps. And even if they did eat a little bit of a black bit, it's just a bit of mouse. So what's wrong with that? I think it was pretty harmless what he did, so I'm going to forgive you.
Well, it's pretty harmless just having a little bit of incinerated mouse.
No, pretty harmless to
crisp.
claim there's mouse bits in the bottom of the crisp packet.
Is that what you think?
Yeah.
Well, now I know what Brother Matt's going to say, because it's in this whole category of lying to children.
Oh, of course, yes, which is always good in my book. However, quite an insight into the crisp industry, this is. Because I had no idea this went on, and what an enormous amount of responsibility he has when all of these potatoes are rushing past him, and he has to spot so many things, and if he doesn't, they end up in crisps, which is amazing. And so, for that reason, I always find that if you're involved in the production of a certain food, you probably never want to eat that food again.
Yes.
Which is why I've been put off sausages, because I used to be involved, and you don't want to see sausages being made and then eat a sausage.
What were in your sausages?
Not great things. So I
Mice?
am no mice, tails or otherwise. And so I am going to forgive, because it involves lying to the kids, and also, as Rebecca says, probably put them off eating crisps.
When Carl Davis was in the other day conducting, he was talking about modern times. He was doing the full orchestral version in London. If you get a chance, watch the beginning of Modern Times. You can do it on YouTube. The whole film is there on YouTube, because he does an opening conveyor belt sequence, which reminded me exactly of the way Robert describes this confession, where his whole job is to just go through the potatoes, trying to sort out the bad ones, and then, hey, it's a mouse, and it's all running away. So I think. So what do you say?
I'm going to forgive. We're going to forgive. Yeah.
It's all here with your collective, which features the Venerable Deadly.
A very, very good afternoon to you.
We have Brother Nigel.
In the confessional.
Thank you very much indeed. Mother Superior making a sick appearance.
Well, I've been away doing some penitence, and I've come back for just a one-off appearance, all right? And I've learnt a lot when I've been away, actually.
You spread a lot of germs.
Far more forgiving than I used to be.
Well, we'll put that to the test, shall we? Here's today's tale, and it comes from Kath. Thank you very much indeed for tonight's story. Father Simon and the Dudes of Delusion.
How dare you?
Well, here we go on a story I've worried about for a long time. I'm in my respectable early 40s with 3 kids under 15 called John, Stephen and Mary, though we've changed the names, obviously.
Okay.
We live in South Wales, and we moved here 8 years ago. I had to move for my job, so we pulled up our roots in London and we moved to this very lovely town where I'm writing to you from today. I have no regrets now, but things were tough to start with, as none of my kids wanted to move. When I told them we were moving to Wales, I'm afraid 2 of them had to look it up on a map and pronounced it too far away. I repeat that we love it now, and essentially we have 3 Welsh kids in an Anglo-Welsh house, but at the time, they were pretty cross. We moved in the summer, and I had a few weeks to get things straight for the new school term. The most time-consuming was getting the uniforms right. All 3 were in the same school, and so 3 lots of everything needed to be bought. Games kit, PE kit, sweatshirt, trousers, skirt, ties, and most expensively, blazers. Lovely blue dark things they were, with the school crest on a badge. I won't be too specific, but it was pretty grand and had a dragon on it. Well, I managed to source most of the uniform second-hand, but the blazers were brand new and did look fabulous. When they all tried them on, I have to admit, I had a little sob. 3 cutest school kids you never did see. I spent most of the night before term started sewing on the school badges to the blazers. I'm not great at sewing, but I thought I'd done a pretty neat job. The red dragon looked stunning against the dramatic dark cotton of the blazer. The first day dawned with all the usual nerves and worries. Notes about allergies, permission forms, school bags, pencil cases were all sorted. John is the oldest, but he was by some way the most nervous and actually scared about the first day in a new school. I drove them the relatively short distance to school, and we sang songs on the way to keep the mood as jolly as possible. It later turned out that all the kids claimed that it was only me singing, and they were actually pulling faces at each other and me at the time. Respect, I don't think so. Anyway, so I dropped them off and get on with my day, sorting out the house, food shopping and that kind of thing, nervously waiting for the end of the day to find out how they all got on. Because it was the first day, I had agreed to pick them up. And after today, they'd be walking. But I knew that, I knew we were in trouble as soon as little Mary got in the car. She was a picture of misery.
Oh, no.
John was next, followed by Stephen, and they started shouting at me, all of them together, in essentially what they said was this. Mum, you got the wrong blazer. This is the wrong school badge. How can you have made such a ridiculous mistake? How can you not know what school we were going to, you ridiculous woman?
Ooh,
in capital letters. Well, the journey home was not good. Not much singing at all. I had, they said, attached the wrong school badge to the right blazer. Yes to a dragon, no to this particular dragon. All 3 reported that their lives had been made very difficult by this badge bungle. Teasing, laughing, and all the things that you don't need on your first day in a new school. Thanks, Mum. I apologised, bought them chips, and apologised again. New badges were obtained within days, and by the end of their week, all was well, except, here's the confession.
Go on.
I knew that the badges were wrong.
What?
It's just that they were the first ones that I found at the end of a very long day of uniform shopping, and they were cheaper, a whole pound cheaper. Yes, I saved £3. I'm not sure why. Yes, to save money, but I bought a badge that looked very similar to the real one, but I saved some cash. I mean, come on, it had a dragon on it.
One dragon's very much... No, it isn't.
Who's going to notice it's the wrong dragon? Answer, absolutely everybody. That's how wrong I was. So, sorry to John and Stephen and Mary. I was trying to save time and money, and all dragons look the same, and they don't exist anyway. But I seek forgiveness from the Caring Collective for a uniform misdemeanour. Well, I guess you can understand, uniform is very, very expensive, but
Yes.
you have to buy the right badge. You can buy the wrong socks, but you don't want to buy the wrong badge. Venerable Deadly.
Wrong badge, Nige. Wrong badge.
Tricky woos, absolutely.
Oh.
Did you say tricky woos?
Yes, I did. It's,
Don't use
all,
that.
all creatures great and small. It's just a throwback.
I can't... Yes, thank you. Aren't you?
Yes.
Unforgivable, I'm afraid.
I think
I'm very, very forgiving, but the wrong badge, all those kids, they'd have gone wild. You got the wrong badge. You got the wrong badge. Unforgivable.
Yeah.
Sorry.
You
I'd
don't-
love to.
You don't want to be different in any way. Anyway, not on the first day. Nigel, what do you say?
Well, I think she's got a snoozing lion or dragon, even rather than a rampant one, and that would no doubt that have been ripe for. Bullying, teasing, torture, whatever. But she was obviously exhausted. She'd taken it all on herself by the sounds of it, Kathy. And she tried to save £3, but she obviously spent more than that because she no doubt had to go and get the correct badge.
Yeah, she did, yeah.
But I just feel sorry for her because the kids didn't want to go. It's worked out, but at the time she was doing her best job. So, Kathy, from me, you are forgiven.
They'll doubtless...
Oh, Nigel, you're such a forgiving person.
On this occasion...
One of those kids will write a misery memoir one day about
Yeah.
how their life was ruined by having the wrong badge on
The blazer
blazer.
was the pièce de
Their
résistance.
dragon wings were clipped, poor kids.
Mother Superior...
We're going through an awful lot. I mean, kids never really want to move, do they? I mean, school uniforms are very expensive, but as Nigel's just pointed out, it was a false economy because she bought the cheap ones, but she ended up having to buy the expensive ones, so it was twice as much. And, kids are so easily humiliated in a new situation where they feel all different and wrong anyway. So, Kathy, I'm sure it was a difficult move. I really can't forgive you because it was... We had a similar confession to this, didn't we, once when the parents were in a new place and they dropped their children off at the wrong school. Do you remember that?
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
And this is a similar thing. No, I really don't forgive you, Kathy.
She'd sort of cut corners elsewhere, hadn't she? So why
But
cut
the thing
corners
is,
on the
she
blazer?
bought
Yeah.
games
Blazer.
kit, PE kit, sweatshirt, trousers, skirt, ties and blazers and saved £3 on the badges.
She was cream crackered. And what she didn't realise then, she will now, that the Welsh are very dragon specific.
Oh.
And as we found
Yes,
out...
you need the
rugby
right
recently,
dragon.
yes.
Okay, very good. So, thank you very much. What did you say?
I said not forgiven.
Okay, so
Yeah.
it's not forgiven from the team here. They were the confessions for this week. Who did you forgive? Here's the thing. You let us know by sending your own confession, because we know you have one. Maybe it's a dental one. Maybe it's a mouse. Maybe it's to do with school uniform. You know the way it's going to happen. confessions@bbc.co.uk. No confessions next week, because I'm not here, but the Confessions podcast will be back the week after.